Thank you, Agus. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And thank you for having me in this session, something that I'm really passionate about, something that I just started a few years ago, and it definitely changed the way I see storytelling in general and how it actually helped to propel my career or my creativity forward. So before I delve into the technical part of this session, I just want to share with you about how I go into podcasting. I learned about podcasting fairly late, sometimes in 2017, when I listened to an audio drama titled Brother Francis, the Barefoot Saint of Assisi. It is a story about the life of one of the most beloved saints in the Catholic Church, and it's called St. Francis of Assisi. And it is also a story that has changed my view of what it means to be a leader and to be always in the service of others. So I love it so much, so much so that I listened to this audio drama so many times, and every time I listen to it, it never fails to fascinate me. I listened to it in my car. I listened to it when I was walking and when I was running. I listened to it when I was in the toilet. So basically, I was so obsessed by it that I had to share this to my friends. Now, because the place that I'm at, podcast is very foreign to the people in my place in Cebu. And so it was quite new, and at least, at that time, and it's still very new now. The most frustrating thing about sharing it with my friends is that they don't know what I'm talking about. And it was even more frustrating when I didn't know how to explain it. So I said, well, they call it audio drama. It's like, this is how I explained to her. It's like watching a movie, but you're not watching a movie. And it's like, what? And it's like watching a movie with your mind through your ears. And am I not looking at the camera? Oh, I'm not looking at the camera, sorry. So my friends still don't know what I'm talking about. And so out of frustration, I gave my earphone to my friend, and I said, just listen to it. And she listened, and after listening for a while, and then she went, oh, huh, what is this? And I said, it's an audio drama. That's what I'm talking about. And later on, I found out that an audio drama is one of the categories in podcast. And that is how it actually inspired me to start my own podcast. It gave me an experience, and I want the same experience for the other people. And I want to inspire the people to do the same. And I know that I have a story to tell, and I know that there are thoughts that I want to share, and that's how I started a podcast. So for whatever reason, if you want to start a podcast, whether it is for fun, or you just want to share with your friends, or maybe your business, especially business, because I believe in business, if you're using podcast has a potential to humanize a brand. what I mean by this is it actually creates more trust. You are able to create more trust with the audience. And I would tell you how podcasts can do that. And so let me share my screen. Can you share? Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is my understanding of podcasting. Podcasting is a listening experience. The reason why I'm able to experience and feel so much inspired, and the reason why my friend has the same reaction, it's because we are experiencing something so intimate. And as a podcasters create that kind of relationship with the audience. And I have that kind of relationship with the podcasters, the one who started this. So this is what I keep in mind when I started my podcast. So podcasting is a listening experience. So how a podcaster can do that? 3 things, I believe. In every storytelling, in every speech that you do, there are 3 things you have to remember. And the same thing with podcasting, that it must have a compelling stories and ideas. Compelling stories and ideas means everything needs to be about something. Because when you start a podcast, you must have a clear direction, and the audience, when they choose to listen to you, they want to listen to something. They want to have something that can inspire them. They're looking for that destination. So compelling stories is how they do it. The second thing is engaging character. I believe engaging character, the critical element of success is that deep connection that a podcaster can have with those who are listening. And that is the reason why I'm engaged to that audio drama. And that is the reason why my friend was engaged to that audio drama, because of the characters, because of the story. And the third element is the unique voice. A unique voice is a niche podcast. A niche, for me, is the voice of the community of interest. And we are living in a society where there are a lot of people have a lot of interests, and we don't stick to one interest. I started with the love for audio drama, and then later on, I found out a podcast called 5 in a Crowd, where 5 adult men, 5 family men, just talking to one another, and I just listened to them talking nonsense. And there's one episode I listened to them. They were talking about how, remember, 5 men, and they're talking about how handsome is Benedict Cumberbatch. But those are the things that I listened. And then I listened to 2 old couple arguing about how should a washing machine works. That ridiculous thing. But why am I attracted to them? Why do any listeners listen to them? It's because of their unique voice. They're giving something to the audience. And so when you want to start a podcast, these are the 3 elements I believe you must have. So why do you want to start a podcast? This is an important question, because you see, there are 2 million active podcasts around the world, with the listeners of 464.7 million and counting listeners out there. So which means there are there is a podcast for everybody. Whatever interest you have, you can find. If you don't believe me, you can just Google whatever you can find on Google, right? So why do you want to start a podcast? So maybe you're curious, you just want to start, or maybe you're from a company and you want to use podcasts, you want to introduce your products, or you're an expert in the field or a niche, and you want to use podcasts to speak to others. So whatever the reason you want to start a podcast, you must have that strong why do you want to start, or else it's not going to work. And I remember when I started my podcast in 2021, I had no direction. I started with whatever I can think of. And then I tried everything. And then suddenly I met a friend his name is Elios. And I met him and I said, I want to make my podcast work. And he asked me, so what did you do with the podcast? Do you have a plan for your podcast? I said, no, I just do whatever I want. So that is the biggest mistake I did. I did not plan. I did not know what to do. And I started podcast just to start a podcast. And that is a wrong direction. So now after getting his advice, I re-strategized my podcast and it became an inspiration for other people. And there are many types of podcasts. Whether you can choose to do interview podcasts, or you want to do conversational podcasts or educational podcasts. Educational, I listen to a podcast where they just teach English and that's it. But I still basic English, but I still listen to that basic English because it was good. Or you can do a solo podcast like myself, or non-fiction storytelling, or fiction storytelling, which I also do it because I love to write fiction. So I try to write fiction and I started a fiction storytelling story as well, or news like BBC, and there's a lot more. So yeah, when you want to start a podcast, you have to know why do you want to start a podcast, and then how are you going to do. You have to plan how are you going to do and what is your podcast is all about. These three elements is also very important when you want to start a podcast. It's when you talk about niche is for me, it's such a vague term, but you have to know what are the areas of interest. And so once you understand the area of interest, then you can start doing it. So what do you need? A good quality recording equipment. The key to quality recording is to find a quiet place. And you do need other things like pop filter, microphone, audio software. Now, when I started my podcast, I bought a very cheap microphone. It's less than 100 ringgit. And when a microphone that is, when you have that cheap microphone, then you can expect the kind of recording quality. So it actually picked up a lot of sounds around me. And I remember that I started my first podcast, my first episode, I took the whole afternoon, and it was only like maybe 15 minutes podcast. I took the whole afternoon to record that one episode because of so many noises, and it was so annoying. And at the end, and this is what I did, I turned off my aircon, I closed all the windows, I closed all the curtains, I took my blanket, and I record under the blanket. That's the quiet place I can find. That is where I find a quiet place and record, and at least there's a quality sound to it that I want. So that is how I started. Now I have a better microphone, so I don't have to do that. So now, how are you going to record your podcast? There are several ways. You can use Adobe Audition, which is subscription based, Audacity, which is free, NSCH WavePad, which is also free for home use. These are softwares, right? Or if you don't want to use all those three, you can actually use Zoom or Skype, because Zoom, I'm not sure about Skype, but Zoom, they have no noise cancellation. So you can use Zoom, or you can use other podcast website to do it. And recording and editing is actually very easy. When people saw me, all these wavelength and I arrange those things, and it looks very complicated, but it's actually very easy. For me, editing is a creative process. It might take a long time, but it's very easy to do. So the first thing you do is record everything, and then you edit. You put things in the right order, and then when you have mistakes, you just cut it out, and then you get the audio quality right. Now I use Adobe Audition because there's a feature, there's a what do you call that? A fixed features where you can I just click podcast. I put there and I click podcast, and that bring out my sound quality. So of course you can manually adjust the quality of it, the levels of the volume and the quality, and you can add sound effect or music, but make sure that if you're not paying for the sound effects or music, make sure it is royalty free, or else your podcast is going to be your podcast will have no sound to it. They will just cancel your sound, and then export audio as an MP3 podcast, and that's it. It's actually very, very easy. Of course, when it comes to editing, I can't do it here because it's a bit technical. So now, of course, some of us, when you want to start a podcast, you don't want just to do it alone. You want to do some interview podcasts. But what if the guests that you want to interview is not at the location? How do you do it? Well, you can either use Zoom or Skype. For me, that's not the best system because of poor audio quality. Now we all know that when two people in Zoom, especially when two people are talking, suddenly the sound just cut off, and you don't want that in podcasts. It's not very good. But for cheap, you can you can use Zoom. But there are also other options. Other options such as Riverside.fm. We can go to the website where the guests do not need an account, and you just send the link, but it is a paid site. You can go to cleanfeed.net. It's a free for basic account. It's also link. The guests do not need to sign up as well. You just send the link, and they will click the link, and they will go to your account, and it is actually audio only. There's no video to it, so it's like talking to the telephone. Another platform is called Zencaster.com. Also using link. For hobbyist account, it's free, which can host up to 2 guests only. So if you have more than 2, you can't have a free account. You can't use the free account, with a total 8 hours recording per month. So these are the options where if you want to record your guests, if your guests are not at the same location as yours. And where to upload podcast episodes. There are so many platforms out there, but I'm only using one. I'm using Spotify for podcasters, formerly known as Anchor. And the reason why I'm using this, I'm not sure about the others, but the reason why I know Spotify for podcasters, it's like a one-stop center. When you upload this your episode to the Spotify for podcaster, the platform will actually distribute your episodes to other platforms like Apple, Google, I think Buzzsprout as well, Simplecast. So it's like a one-stop center. And that is why I love using Spotify for podcasters. And it's easy. So starting a podcast is actually very easy, and you don't need a studio to do it. All you need is a microphone, a computer, a quiet room, a software, editing software, and you're good to go. So if you want to start a podcast, now you know the steps. The rest is for you to explore. So I hope that this presentation benefits you and you learn something from this. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jane, for the interesting workshop. Will you take question, Jane?
Can.
Okay, my first question, Jane. I've seen in YouTube, they are doing like podcasts, talking to one or two people. Does it consider as a podcast? The format
Yes.
is the same, but
Yes.
they have a video. And what do you think
Yes.
about it? Why we have to do as a this only voice podcast compared to those in the new format in YouTube? What do you think about it?
The YouTube kind of podcast, I don't really know. When you go to YouTube, you have to watch the video, which I don't really like to sit and watch people talking long, like 1 hour, because podcast you don't have it all depends on you. You want to talk for 1 hour, you want to talk to 2 hours, it's up to you. There's no time frame for that. Now when you go to YouTube, it's a video, and normally for us like journalists, we always say when you go to video, when you do video, it is best that the video is between 3 to 5 minutes. Why? Because the people who are watching are always on their phone. And when they're on the phone, they're using the data plan. They're using the data. So it will eat up the data, which is not very data friendly. So people will prefer the listening because it is always on the go. It doesn't eat up a lot of data because it's only audio. So if you take a public transport, you don't stand there or sit there and watch video. People sit there and listen. So I would prefer, and I think a lot of people would prefer the audio kind of the audio kind of podcast. But of course, it is up to preferences. If you want to go on YouTube and do podcasts, it's up to you. But it is very hard on YouTube now. If you want to really start doing podcasts on YouTube, and you really want to start, let's say you want to make it as a career, you want to start as a business, it's very hard to find that audience in YouTube. It's very hard in YouTube now, actually. So now we have this kind of platform, a different platform we can go and make use of it. So I hope I answered that question.
Yes, thank you, Jane. I never listened to podcasts, but your answers sounds very logical for me. And yeah, I can accept that. Thank you. One more question from Will. Go ahead, Will.
Jane, can you tell me, in your experience, if you're going to start a podcast, what is an optimal kind of a length for your podcast to be? Because I know that there's quite a variety out there, and which is the better one to go for?
Oh, okay. From my experience, it's actually up to preferences as well. I listen to podcasts which is less than 5 minutes. I have listened to podcasts which is less than 15 minutes. My own podcast, I limit to 20 because that is the length that I want for the audience. I want it to be 20, and for the, let's say, for the people who's on the go, like from my home to my office is 20 minutes, and that's it. That is how I plan. It's at the most it will be 20 minutes, but there's no length. Some people would go to 1 hour, and that's totally fine. But if you want to go for 1 hour, my advice is that your podcast has to be very interesting. It has to be something that draw on your audience to listen until the end. Like a crowd. I listen to a crowd. The podcast is like 1 hour 15 minutes, 1 hour 30 minutes, and still I listen to them. So there's no I cannot say what is the time length, what is the ideal time length. I cannot give you the exact answer, because we're living in the streaming world, and there's no limit to it. The creativity is all up to you. Yeah, I hope I answered that question.
That's
Thank you,
interesting.
Jane.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. Thank you, Will. Okay, it seems that the workshop is very interesting. And Dave, you will be the last person to ask question. Yeah, we are running out of time, and keep it short. Jane, keep it short. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane, I would like to ask, podcasts, when you upload in platforms like Spotify and all those, how do you go about it? Can you share some information? How do you go about monetizing it?
For Spotify for podcasters, I know Spotify for podcasters, it depends on region. Like in Malaysia, we still can't monetize it. For other platform, I'm not really sure, but of course I will go into I will dive into that, because when I go into podcasts, of course, in the long term, yes, I want to monetize that my podcast if possible. But for now, Spotify for podcasters, there are only certain countries that can monetize that. But for Malaysia, we can't monetize it yet. It's not available yet. It's not that it's not that they don't want to give us. Maybe it's not available here yet. Yeah, it's just like YouTube. You know, you have to reach a certain level so that you can monetize your video. It's the same thing. I think it's the same thing. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Dave. Everyone, please give Toastmaster Jane a big round of applause. Well done, Jane. Thank you for the workshop, Jane. Thank you.